Good evening. I'm the Reverend John Balance, a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the North Hills. Our minister, the Reverend Jane Thixton, is away on study leave, so she asked me to take her place in moderating this evening's forum. Welcome to the Joint Social Justice Forum sponsored by St. Brendan's Episcopal Church, the Unitarian Universalist Church of the North Hills, and the Community Presbyterian Church of Ben Avon. Tonight, we have the honor of hearing Olivia Bennett, the chair of the Allegheny County Council's Public Safety Committee, on the recently adopted ordinance authorizing a countywide independent police review board. Before I introduce our speaker, I invite Father Regis Smolka, the priest in charge at St. Brendan's, to offer an opening prayer. Father Regis.
Thank you, Reverend Balance. Heavenly Father, God of the universe, we thank you for this evening and for our ability to have a desire to learn more about the way things work in our universe. We are particularly grateful for our speaker tonight, who is going to share with us information that many of us have never understood or that we even know that exists. And so we're so grateful for this. We thank you for all the protections that you give to us, especially through the police. And we ask you, God of the universe, to guide us tonight as we listen, guide us as we speak, and help this event to be positive for each one of us individually, for the people that we represent, and for our community in this small area near Pittsburgh. So thank you for this opportunity, and through the power of your love, we say amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Father Regis. Tonight's forum will be recorded, as you heard at the beginning, for the benefit of some of those on the key players of the various churches' social justice network who are not able to be here live tonight. There's a possibility that the recording might be mounted on the websites of some of our churches for information, because this is important information for the community, for others who cannot be here tonight. With the exception of those of us who are conducting this forum, participants are muted and their videos turned off. During the presentation, please enter any questions that you have into the chat. I will retrieve the questions and pose them to our speaker after her presentation. Our speaker this evening is Olivia Bennett, or Liv, as she prefers to be called. She, as indicated earlier, is the chair of the Public Safety Committee of the Allegheny County Council. I'm not sure, Liv, when were you elected? A year ago or 2 years ago?
My election was in 2019, but I took my seat in January of 2020.
Thank you. She is a community activist who represents District 13 of Allegheny County Council. She has spent several years fighting for justice in Allegheny County. She's advocated for sensible gun control, police accountability, and anti-racist policies in her work. Her interest in politics and activism began when she was a child, looking up to her father, who was a member of the Pittsburgh Public School Board. Although he passed away when she was young, his impact continues to be a source of inspiration for her today. She was raised in the Manchester section of the city of Pittsburgh, where she saw the detrimental effects of violence and economic hardship. Witnessing the painful outcomes of poverty and the crack epidemic in her community, this shaped her vision to create a better society. She is currently a resident of public housing in Northview Heights and can be found working with area leaders and partners to ensure local residents receive the resources that they need. In 2018, she was involved in the process of opening the Northview Heights Public Safety Center in her neighborhood. She works with organizations such as the Alliance for Police Accountability, Take Action Mon Valley, and was a mentor in the Be a Middle School Mentor for United Way. Liv is also an active member of Macedonia Church of Pittsburgh. So with that introduction, before we get into specific to the legislation that's the focus tonight on the Independent Police Review Board, I asked Liv if she would please briefly describe scope and charge the responsibilities of the Public Safety Committee for Allegheny County Council. Liv, take it away.
All right, so thank you for having me, and to talk briefly about county council, because you can't really talk about the committees without talking about the bodies. So county council is the legislative body of Allegheny County. It is a 15-member body. 13 members are specific to districts and 2 are at-large members. So to go to Reverend Balance's question of public safety, Public Safety Committee is one of 12 committees that exist on county council. And this is where the work really gets done. What you hear in regular meetings are introductions of legislation, and you'll hear the second reading and vote of legislation, but the debate and real work around that legislation actually happens in committees. And so the Public Safety Committee is the committee that really gets all of the things that are related to public safety. So the Independent Police Review Board came through that committee. There's some other police legislation such as no-knock warrants, chokeholds. We had a paint ordinance come through that committee around hunting. So anything that is related to public safety generally comes to this committee and is debated in this committee and then sent back to council for the vote up or down, whether it passes. Does that answer that question?
I think that's a very good summary. Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to jump right into the Independent Police Review Board. And so I wanted to start off with the background on why the Independent Police Review Board has been advocated for in Allegheny County and when that started. And so that really started in 1995 after the murder of Johnny Gamage in Brentwood. And so if you are familiar with Brentwood, it is a community that sits right out off of, it's really off of 51, and it's out going towards the Mon Valley, and it's not a part of the city of Pittsburgh. However, after the murder of Johnny Gamage, the city of Pittsburgh created an Independent Police Review Board and has had one for the last 25 years or so, while the county did not. And there are about 110 police departments in Allegheny County. So the city of Pittsburgh is one police department, and their Independent Police Review Board covered their police department. So that left 109 police departments that had no oversight around police. And so that was really the push as to why folks have been since 1995 advocating for a countywide police review board. In 2018, if you will recall, there was a murder in East Pittsburgh of a young man named Antoine Rose II. So when Antoine Rose II was murdered by East Pittsburgh police, the reigniting of the countywide Independent Police Review Board resignated, and that is what drove me to run for this office, to do exactly this, get an Independent Police Review Board enacted in Allegheny County. And so in April of this year, we were able to pass a countywide Independent Police Review Board. So what does that mean for Allegheny County? And what does that look like? So the board that was passed will be a 9-member board. 4 of those members will be appointed by the county council, And 4 of those members will be appointed by the county executive, while 1 member will be appointed, jointly appointed, which basically means selected by the chief executive and approved by county council. That board will be in charge. It will be an independent board that will be in charge of oversight of police. So who would use this board? Well, in Allegheny County, and in the state of Pennsylvania, counties do not have authority to actually force police departments or municipalities into participating in a police review board. So these officers or these departments have to opt in. The only department that is forced in since this legislation was passed in the county are the Allegheny County Police. Other than that, every other department would have to opt in. And what does that look like? That looks like their councils or mayors opting them in. And so that is where we are really lobbying our community members to be involved in that process, because what we need is for community members to engage their councils and their mayors and say, we would like our police department to actually be, under this police review board. So the police review board, these 9 members, they don't have any authority as far as firing, hiring, or anything of that nature. And I should have told Brian to go to the next slide a long time ago. Sorry, Brian.
No worries. I was just texting John here. Hang on just a second.
No worries. So, so this independent police review board is like it says right here, is a neutral panel and examines cases of police conduct. This panel that would get these police misconducts, those police misconducts come from community members. And if that police department is opted in, then the independent police review board would go ahead and investigate the complaint made by the complainant or the civilian that was who had witnessed who had experienced misconduct by that police officer or that police department. As I'm trying to go through, Brian, could you skip to like 2 slides? Because I think I hit on everything on the next slide. So what happens with the police review board is the police review board would actually investigate those cases that come before them, and then they would make recommendations back to the municipal or municipality or that police department. These are just recommendations. These are not, it's not anything binding. So the police review board does not have authority to like fire, to do any disciplinary action. All they can do is review, they can review their policies, they can review the incident, and they can only make recommendations as to what that municipality or that department should do as a result of that complaint. And it's up to that municipality to actually follow through if they choose to with those recommendations. The independent police review board would keep a record if that department did or did not follow through with those recommendations. But again, they have no authority to actually make the department comply. And so again, right now, the only department that is in this independent police review board at this moment is the Allegheny County Police Review Board. Allegheny County Police, because that's who Allegheny County Council has jurisdiction over. And so this police review board is set to start in January of 2022. And so again, we are now in the position, since it's been enacted, to go ahead and fill the board. And what that looks like, again, is for appointed by the chief executive, for appointed by county council, and one jointly. So in order for us to be able to, and just as just a side note, kind of, if there's anybody wondering why we can't force police departments in, that actually sits at the state to actually force those police departments to participate. And so since that hasn't happened at the state, that is why we are actually having to have them opt in and not being able to force their participation. This ordinance obviously is a beginning. I don't know how many have followed this, but again, this has been a few years in the making. And so there have been a few pieces of legislation that went before council that proposed independent police review board, and this is the one that passed. If I'm being honest, I think this is probably the weakest of the ordinances that came before council. So we have an opportunity to strengthen it. With anything, it's always room for improvement. And I think that rule is especially pertinent when it comes to our laws. We are still amending the Constitution to this day. So I always want to give us grace when we're talking about our laws, especially new laws, to make sure that we don't want to think that it's a one and done and that is exactly right when we initially pass things. And we want to make sure that when we go into the practice of it, when this actually rolls out in January of 2022, that if whatever we find, because it's one thing when you're speaking of it in ideology terms, but it's another thing when you're talking about it being walked out practically. So as we walk it out practically, as we see things that may need to be improved, we will expect to be doing amendments to strengthen it as we go on. Trying to look through the slides to make sure that I kind of hit on everything, which I think I did. And so in closing, I would just say, again, Brian, if you want to go to the last slide, that's cool. But again, this is not a new idea. This is something that has been around and talked about and actually implemented in the city of Pittsburgh for the last 20 odd years. And really this is now that we've passed this, we're going to be coming out and doing, I guess, what you would call to actions to engage our community and to really talk about this and really get your participation in getting your departments opted in. We hear a lot of times that folks don't have problems with the police, their departments are fine. And what my response to that usually is if your department is fine, then you should have no problem opting into a police review board. It'd be very eventless for you then, right? So we really want to make sure that folks know that this is available to them, that this has been erected on county council, and that in 2022, departments will be able to opt into it so that folks around the county who engage police or have interactions with police know that there is a mechanism there for folks for investigation if their police department is opted in. Lastly, like the city of Pittsburgh, I do believe that there will be a mechanism, and we haven't talked about this officially yet, but I know the city of Pittsburgh did this because they were the only police review board in the county. A lot of folks didn't understand their jurisdiction, so they would get a lot of complaints from other municipalities, and they kept those complaints and logged those complaints. So my hope is that we would be able to do the same, even if the police department isn't opted in, and though we can't really do any investigation or recommendations, that we keep a record of police, we keep a record of complaints regardless if we can or cannot do anything with them, just so that we can start collecting this data across the county as, you know, around police departments and how our citizens actually experience them. So that's really my hope, and I think that that's really an easy, you know, do. And so that would be my last thing, is that even if your department isn't opted into it, that folks could still have an avenue to have it at least registered, even if they can't technically do anything, so that we can continue trying to make our county better, especially when in regards to police. And I think if we keep records of these things, it'll start drawing the picture on its own. It's just that we haven't had a mechanism to keep these records. So with that, I see some questions popping in the chat. So I don't want to keep talking, and I would really like to hit on your questions because they would be more pertinent to you.
Okay, let me ask this question first that was in the chat. What would motivate any police department to opt in and follow the recommendation?
Well, I think those are two separate questions. So I think motivations to opt in is just that you want your police department to have the appearance of being above board. And if you are opting in, then you're saying, you know, I don't have any issue with outside agencies having access to my department because I believe my department to be above board. Also, using it as a tool to, you know, get police officers out. And because even when I'm talking to police officers and police chiefs, they don't want officers to be able to move around and work in their departments when they're doing acts of misconduct. It makes the whole department look bad. So I think that it will help with the pressure of these of departments having to come down with disciplinary action. Like they can have an out for that with the police review board. Like this was the police review board's recommendation. We just chose to follow it. So that could be a thing. But also, you know, for these departments that don't have incidents of, you know, misconduct, I mean, why wouldn't you opt in? It just gives you another level of especially in this era of community and police trust being rebuilt. I think that would is a good way for that, a good way, an easy way, a low barrier way for you to do that, for a department to do that. And the question about following the recommendations, again, that is up to the department. But again, the department has to answer to the community. So as communities become more and more engaged, when they see that their departments and their police force are not following recommendations and police officers are given passes, I think that's going to really jog some conversation in that community. So, you know, leaders might be replaced that are going to push down the hammer on those police departments, because at the end of the day, the police departments don't answer to themselves. They answer to the councils and the mayors of the boroughs. So, you know, I think there'll be some very hard conversations if public opinion of police forces start changing because they are out here doing, you know, things that are looked at questionably without any type of transparency, accountability, or listening to any type of other authority.
Before the next question, let me emphasize a point that Liv made. The person who asked this question said, what would motivate any police department to opt in? It's not the police department that opts in, it's the municipal governing body that chooses to opt in. And they may be fighting with their police department over that issue, but it's the municipal governing body that opts in, not the police department, right?
Correct.
And
I understand that question though, because that was a big misunderstanding. Even walking through this process, it's like, oh, we need to talk to the police departments. Well, no, you don't. The police departments do not opt themselves in. So
right,
that's definitely some narrative correcting that we as council probably need to do better on.
right. And I would emphasize one point that many police departments seem to be hostile to this. I'm sorry, resistant to this, as if somehow this is meant to be anti-police, which is not the case. If it's properly done, I would say it can help the police do their job better. But okay, the next question, Liz, is have any communities indicated that they're willing to opt in?
So we have one community so far, and that was Sharpsburg, and they said this 2 drafts ago when when the idea of the independent police review board started being talked about on county council. They were one of the first to be like, hey, we have nothing to hide. We wouldn't mind opting in. We don't, again, we have nothing to hide. So I feel like we should be taking the hand of the Sharpsburg Police Department and taking them along with us on this tour to talk to these other departments. Like, that's the energy you're supposed to have. If your department is on the up and up, then you shouldn't have any issues with opting in. But yes, so far we just have Sharpsburg.
We have another question, Liz, that says, could university police departments be included?
That is an awesome question. And I don't know that answer because that did come up in the, and I want to say it's only open to municipalities, I want to say, but that could be a good amendment because we do have a lot of university police and other police that are not necessarily municipal police, such as the hospital police, as they already mentioned, university police. There's some private security folks that are around that, are kind of private police. So I'm gonna take a note on that. That could be a good amendment to make sure that because yes, Port Authority Police, I saw that, yes. And so, and let's walk back. Port Authority Police have been involved in a police involved killing, Bruce Kelly Jr. And University of Pittsburgh, that is where the officer that killed Antoine Rose II came from. So it is not, I do see the pertinence and the, the necessity to include these police departments too. So thank you for pointing that out.
Another question, Liv, is there any proactive piece to this legislation? Can the review board make recommendations on hiring practices, various policy and training?
Not as it's written right now. If it is written, I will admit it is written very reactive. So I think that those things would be reviewed if something happened, and in the reviewing of what happened, is there an issue in the policy? Is there an issue with how y'all hired? Or I think that comes in the reviewing of, but that's very exactly what you're saying, reactive. In one of the earlier drafts of the legislation, we were trying to do that, trying to provide some type of I can't talk today, some incentives to participate in the police review board. We were trying to do some proactive, like, hey, like, if you want us to help with your policy, if you want us to look over it, if you want us to be a support in this way, we're here for that. But those versions got knocked down, and I don't believe that is in the last version. I don't remember seeing that. I'm sorry, I've read too many versions of these and they're all mixing up in my head now. So, but yes, I think that is also a place that we can use, look to improve, because also when I drafted my version of this legislation, I actually wanted to include like CIT training for folks that opted in, and accreditation for police departments, which would give some level of some standard for that department to have to like meet meet up to. And some of these things are very, very expensive for police departments, body worn cameras. Another thing that I was looking to kind of get funding to give incentives for police departments to opt in. But again, these things are very expensive for some departments who don't have enough funding to, hire police officers and provide them with these additional things. So we were really looking to try to do that, to use this mechanism to be a support to our departments as well. So that is an area that we look to be able to improve on as this legislation and as this walks out in reality in 2022.
Liv, you remind me of one aspect that I think we need to point out, since this is not meant to be anti-police, but ultimately to help them do their jobs better. It's entirely possible that a police officer would be accused of improper conduct when they had absolutely done nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This independent police review board would be an obvious way to exonerate the officers. So here's another question. I'm way up here in Cranberry Township. Is there any parallel effort in Butler County that you can identify for us?
Oh, no, I have not heard of anything in Butler County. Now, what I have heard is that there is something at the state that was introduced, House Bill 530, and I believe there's a Senate bill also that's mirroring this, and it would require first and second class, or maybe second and third class. I'm always messing this up. So, but it would require our counties in Pennsylvania, and I want to say second and third class counties in Pennsylvania, to participate, to have independent police review boards and participate in them. So, while I don't hear any other, I heard Philly is trying to do one, and I think Erie might be trying to do one. I have not heard anything in Butler, but if the state actually did it, then it would trump everybody else's. So, or it would require, either it would trump and develop one for everybody, or it would require Butler to do that work and make one. But either way, we are trying to push at the state to get them to do this, because in that same legislation is making those departments participate instead of them having to opt in.
Here's another question, Liv, really going to stretch you. What about state police?
State police do not fall under county jurisdiction. So state is above, if you do like the cup effect, I guess it's boroughs, cities, boroughs, municipalities, cities, county, state. And so the state actually has authority over us. It doesn't go the other way around. So no, we do not have authority to make state police participate in the Independent Police Review Board. However, if the state did this, then they probably could make the state police participate in the Independent Police Review Board.
Here's another question that is akin to the one about university police, I think. The writer points out that Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield in Pittsburgh has a police force, as well as Allegheny General and St. Clair Hospital in Mount Lebanon. I'm not sure who they answer to.
Neither am I. I didn't know Highmark had a police department, so that's news to me. And I used to work there, huh? So that's that. I know UPMC has a police department, and I imagine, just because they mimic each other, that AHN probably does, but I've never seen them. I have actually seen UPMC police, so definitely we want to make sure that those folks are included. But yes, I don't know who has jurisdiction over Highmark, but it's not a county thing. They might be one of those private police, because we have a bunch of those in Allegheny County and through the Commonwealth. So maybe one of those like private policing that is under the jurisdiction of, I don't know, somebody in Highmark, just like Port Authority police, even though Port Authority is under the county technically. Allegheny County Council does not have authority over Port Authority police.
Here's a question that delights me, Liv. To whom should applications to be part of this board be directed? We've
You
made
can do,
an applicant right here.
well, yes, I am excited for that. So those could be, you can send those to me and CC, my chief of staff, Ken Vahala. That's Varhola, because I just think I butchered his name a little bit, but I will also throw his name in the chat. But yes, if you send your letter of interest resume over to us, then we will make sure that it is included in the rest of the interest letters, so that when we get to the point of appointing these folks, we have your information as well.
Here's another question pointing some of the complexities that come into this. The writer says, Ohio Township Police covers a number of boroughs and townships. Does Ohio Township have the lone decision about opting in?
So usually when a police department covers multiple communities, well, let me walk that back. I know when communities regionalize police departments and use one police department, that regionalization, when they do it, it gives all of the communities a seat on what is kind of like an advisory type board. So they make sure that everybody is kind of getting equal distribution. They're all like working on the payroll. Everybody's divvying in their fair share. I'm not sure if that looks the same if a police department just consumes some other communities because those communities asked them to. So I would go and actually ask for I'm sure there's some type of memorandum of understanding between those departments, which would line out what, if those other communities have any say in what that department does. So if those other communities that Ohio Township is covering, if there's like an MOU that says, oh, well, you're covering us, so we have some say in what you're doing. And especially if those other areas are paying into the Ohio Police Department, Ohio Township Police Department for their protection and use for these other communities, I would say that y'all probably should have a say, but again, it would be based on the agreement that was made when they started covering those other communities.
Yes, let me say, you have to start somewhere. And the only way one can learn and improve this is by opting in, doing the best you can, and then building in the changes as you learn. Who knew there would be so many complications to this? Another question, if a community does not opt in, is there any recourse?
No. I'm laughing because we did all of these questions we have talked about. So I'm loving that y'all are kind of thinking in the ways that we thought. And maybe whoever's asking these questions should run for a seat because y'all think a lot like us as legislators. But we did think of maybe we didn't want to punish people. We didn't want to be, because one of the things that we tossed around, and I'll just share, just being transparent, is all of these municipalities outside of the city of Pittsburgh often use Allegheny County services, whether that is their police when there's a homicide, or their SWAT, or if it's their facilities for processing ballistics, and even the training center, right? So we did quickly toss around, oh, well, if they don't opt in, maybe they don't have access to these things, but we don't want to take services away from citizens in the effort to try to force police in. And if we, aren't investigating homicides and supporting our communities when these services are needed, then I don't think that puts us in a good light. So I don't know a good punishment or a good pushback for departments not participating yet. And that's why I really think this should be done at the state, because the state could actually put these things, make it a lot more challenging for these departments not to participate. We're just kind of in the position of like, hey, we built it, please come and do this. So we haven't really found a good mechanism, if you will, for saying if you don't participate, then this will happen, because that would look like taking away services where they would most desperately probably be needed.
Well, we all know the phrase from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Well, one thing's for sure, if you don't build it, they're not going to come. And here's a question to give you an opportunity to vent, Liv. Why does it take so long to get important legislation passed? And also, why does it require murder to get legislation drafted and considered?
Do you know how many times I've asked that question? I mean, I'm a Black woman, hello. So like, when we were looking at what happened after George Floyd, and it was just, it was great, right? Like, it was exciting, and we never saw anything like this in our lifetimes, with so many people of such diversity out in the streets around such a cause. But we also had the other side, the paradox here, like, yes, yay, we got all these folks engaged, but the paradox there is somebody had to be knelt on for over 9 minutes to engage this, right? So it's always this question. And if I had an answer to that, I'd probably be a lot more wealthy than I am right now. But why things take so long? Because it's government. That's all I can say. That's how government is. If you want to see something like take the slowest walk ever, put it in government. And that's why I often have multiple arms, and I work in multiple arms. While I have a government position, I also work as a community organizer, and I'm also engaging grassroots organizations and community members, because a lot of times a lot of things that folks want to see, we can do ourselves and outside of government, and government can maybe adopt it when they're like, oh, that actually works. So sometimes that happens. Gun legislation, for example, we haven't seen any movement on gun legislation, but after so many mass shootings, Dick said they're no longer selling high-powered rifles. I think Walmart said that. So sometimes it takes the private industry to get government to move, because government is super slow. You have people on there. Unfortunately, all of us are not centered on the work either. Some of us didn't run for the right reasons. Some of us didn't run to serve our communities. Some of us ran to be obstructionists. So there's all types of situations on these legislative bodies that hold up legislation. So for us, it took us that long to get 8 votes, to get a version of the bill that would actually get 8 votes. And so that it took that long. I came into office, I was working on, around Independent Police Review Board before I came into office. But when I came into office, day one, I was having conversations. When I got elected, before I even took office, when I was meeting with my co-counselors, I was having these conversations. I'm like, this is my goal. This is my big goal. This is my number one goal. And so, and then it's your why. Why is it that you want this? What is it from your community member? And everybody, as I told you from the beginning, council's made up of 15 members. 13 of those are district specific. So what happens in District 13 might not be the same as what happens in District 7. So their experience of police in District 7 might be hunky-dory, while District 13 are like, why hasn't this been done years ago? So you have to, and it is all of that combined. You have to really talk to your co-counselors, make them understand your vote is not only for your district, it's for the county. And while your district might be in a great place, you are making a vote for the county, and you should be voting and legislating for the least of these. I don't know how many times I have said this and how many times I have had to say it over again on different legislation. but that is really why it takes so long. It's because we have to do the long work of educating our members and really talking to them, building those relationships. And we're like, this is why. Oh, you saw George Floyd. Not again, this is why. So and the same thing, anything that's like kind of, I don't want to call it radical, but to them it would be radical. I mean, I had to have the same conversations when we did Juneteenth as a county-wide holiday. I had to do the same conversations when we banned hair discrimination, because they don't, everybody doesn't understand why these things are necessary. And if you haven't experienced this firsthand, you might have to be walked along on the long route to understand why folks are asking and fighting for it. So I know that was kind of long-winded, but really that is the experience and why things take so long on in government. As you see, in some places of government, nothing's moving. So
Well, as Lyndon Johnson once famously said, politics is the art of the possible. And as Liv pointed out, these issues are complicated and people have different opinions. And it just takes a lot of long, hard, earnest work to change things, particularly when it comes to the area of policing, because there's so much fear on all sides about this issue, particularly from the police, whose lives are on the line every day that they go to work. So this is a very difficult issue with a lot of tensions involved. At any rate, Liv, back to the question. Here's a practical one. Are there any staffing dollars for this independent review board?
So again, when we designed one of the original bills, it had a whole like executive director, and would have been staff. This version actually comes under, and I would love to separate this out. This is an amendment that I'm dying to do, but no, I can't get done in this administration. So just waiting for a couple years to get this one done. But this version actually puts all of this under the county executives administration. So the county manager would be in charge of a lot of this. And so it really doesn't have that independent feel I would love for it to have, but again, it is a start. So therefore, there is money for a solicitor, I want to say, but as far as like an executive staff, I think that's not in there, and there might be some money for like a part-time type of staff, but I don't think it's we haven't gotten to the point where it's going to, where I would love it to be, where like Beth Pittenger in the city of Pittsburgh is the executive director of the Independent Police Review Board, and everything kind of stops with her. There's no, it doesn't go into the city administration in any way, shape, or form. And so we would love to do that, but we had obviously, and maybe I should have said this on the top too, in order to get anything passed in the county through county council, it has to have the signature of the executive. So if we don't pass something that the executive administration is comfortable with, they can veto it. And that happened with paid sick leave. And we did not want to see that happen with this ordinance. We thought it was too important. So we figured that something was better than nothing. As you said, Reverend Balance, if you don't build it at all, they can't come.
Well, when David Harris was at our forum a few months ago, he made the point that when it comes to reforming police, you have to do this in Harrisburg because the state limits very strongly what municipalities and counties can do. So this leads to this question. This writer said, I think the state requiring police review boards is the answer. Otherwise, what carrot can we offer to encourage opposition?
I agree. But here's the problem at the state right now. The state is majority the other party that does not want to see this done. I know I don't want to like get too partisan in here because this is a nonpartisan event, but but that is really what's happening at the state. So anything that's introduced, like there's been tons of bills introduced at the state level around police accountability, and they get some traction and they get talked about, but they never get voted on. They stall out in committee. They might use the filibuster. They do whatever they can to not actually do anything. I know colleagues, I shouldn't say colleagues because I'm not at the state rep level, but I know friends at the state rep level who actually took over the rostrum so that they can, after George Floyd's murder, and just to demand that they hear, not even pass, just hear the bills that are up for police reform, and not a lot of movement on that. Yesterday, Josh Shapiro from the Attorney General's office was instrumental in getting the database up and running. But that's the Attorney General's office. That's not the state legislature, which is where we're asking a lot of this to be done. So it's just a really, really tough atmosphere there right now with getting anything done around police reform. But they're passing some other things that aren't as lovely, but I will leave it at that.
Okay, I just put into the chat, I hope it comes across properly, a link that Liv gave to me, that if you follow that, it will take you to the full text of the Independent Police Review Board ordinance. I would encourage you to read that, look at it in the details, and become an advocate in your community for this. We have to start somewhere. This is important stuff. My view is that for one of the things that makes this such a difficult issue for us is that for many years, as citizens, we have not paid sufficient attention to our police departments and insisting that they understand what it is that we want as citizens for them to do and not do, and see to it that they are properly equipped and trained and disciplined when they do not adhere to the guidance given. It seems clear that thus far, police seem not to be able to police themselves. And somehow, the point is, we cannot give up our responsibility for being clear to our police officials what we want them to do and how we want them to do it. They have a dangerous, difficult job. They need our full support, but they need to be accountable to us as citizens. I don't see any other questions at this point, Liv. Maybe I'm missing some, but I do have one myself, and that is, you sort of referenced it earlier, and that is, I've heard some members of county council say, and municipalities say, but we don't need something like this. We have good police officers, leave them alone and let them do their job. How would you suggest that we respond to someone in government when we approach them and they give us that kind of answer?
I think that, again, I think that, you know, if your department is good, then why the pushback on oversight? Why is there a pushback on the police department having some mechanism of accountability outside of the police department? Because what we also hear is there's already mechanisms for police to an oversight of police. And then they name a bunch of other police agencies, internal affairs, FBI, Department of Justice. These are all other policing just by another name. So policing, for lack of a better way to put it, is not the optimal model, at least in my book. So I feel like, and also I would say that it would probably help with liability as well. If you're already opted into this police department, independent police review board, then it shows that you actually are trying to find ways to hold your police officers accountable. So if by chance something ungodly does happen, if a police officer is involved in a shooting, like Lord forbid, they already have the covering saying, you know what, we were in the police review board. We are fully open to the Police Review Board investigating this, and whatever recommendations they come out with, we are fully going to be supportive of. I think it just makes it look so much cleaner, look so much more community oriented, where folks aren't guessing and wondering why police aren't being held accountable in some instances. And again, if your police department is great, then there would be no time that you probably would even see anybody from the Police Review Board. So I feel like it's a win-win for anybody. It's a win for anybody to opt in. And I don't see any really loss for it. And as much as departments are paying and cities and municipalities and boroughs are becoming bankrupt because they're having to pay out so much in these police misconduct claims. East Pittsburgh, which was the area where Antoine Rose II was murdered, they don't even have a police department anymore. So I think, I think that is the way to be proactive. As you asked earlier, Reverend Balance, about it being proactive or reactive. I think this is a way for departments to be proactive in showing that they want to make sure that their community members are going to be safe, and that there is a mechanism if something should happen for community members to feed into that will be impartial and help to mitigate some of these issues. And you made a point earlier, Reverend Balance, that I wanted to come back to. The majority of cases that come before the Independent Police Review Board in the city of Pittsburgh hardly ever go anywhere because they're not found to be credible, or body cam shows that it's not credible. So this is not, again, it's not anti-police. A lot of times when these cases hit the Independent Police Review Board, it actually vindicates the police officer. So I think this is a good protection for both parties, both civilian and police. And again, it's not to vilify police, but it is to weed out bad police, because those folks we don't need.
Well, the last question for you, Liv. What is the process for municipalities to opt in? Is it as simple as reaching out to you, Liv?
So the opt-in, a municipality would basically do a ordinance or motion to opt in to the police, Independent Police Review Board. It would be the municipality's kind of way of doing an MOU with the county in their participation. So it would look like legislation coming from their municipality or borough saying that they desire to opt in to the Allegheny County Police Review Board.
Liv, I personally am very grateful for you for your really detailed knowledge of this and your passion for it. I hope that all of you who've been here tonight will become a personal advocate in your municipality to get the administration to understand the value and the importance of this. We need to start somewhere. It's not perfect, but it is a beginning. And if we can take one step at a time, we will improve justice in this country and have better policing. So thank you, Liv.
Thank you all. I thank you all for your great questions. I mean, these were really great questions and I love the engagement. So thank you so much for having me and asking me to come and do this, because you just made it easier. You took one check mark off of my list there. So thank you so much.
Thank you again for your efforts and for being here tonight. So I'm going to ask the new deacon from St. Brendan's, Daryl Johnson, to offer a closing prayer.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Let us pray. A common prayer for social justice. Almighty Father, who created us in your own image, grant us grace fearlessly to contend against the viruses of fear and racism which infect our land and promote indifference. and injustice in our society. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred that harden our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us. Unite us in bonds of love. And work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth. Grant that those entrusted with the protection of our people may treat all persons, irrespective of race, gender, or other attributes that define our diversity, with respect, honoring their dignity as equal members of the human community. Grant us also the courage to make no peace with oppression, that we may reverently use our freedom in the promotion of justice in our world. And this we pray for the sake of our sisters and brothers in this community and everywhere. Amen.
Thank you, Daryl. I'm not, is Father Regis still on the call?
I do not believe so.
Daryl, do you know if there is a forum for this group of churches for September?
I do not, but I'll find out and I will let you know.
Okay.
This is, I wanted to express my own personal thanks to Liv. I just thought your presentation was fantastic and your answers to the questions were detailed and thorough and complete. And I think you just treated all of those questions with enormous respect. So thank you so much for helping us, and think about coming back.
Oh, I would be happy to come back, and I think I have to give a shout out to Reverend Balance, because he's the one that did the PowerPoint slide for me, because that's a whole different, maybe when we come back, we could talk about these different offices and what they do and how they, how some of them are not very supported, like County Council, we don't have a dedicated staff. So I appreciate you, Reverend Balance. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For all of you, let me leave with these thoughts. When McClay was chief of police in the city of Pittsburgh, he made the point very specifically that in order for the police to do their job, it requires a clear and strong cooperation between the police and the citizens that they are there to protect and serve. But as you know, Liv has done her part. Now, in order for justice to advance, it's up to us to do our part in taking the steps that we can individually so that collectively we make a difference. It's only this kind of citizen effort that ever gets real change done in this world. So with that, Liv, thank you so much. And
thanks,
all of you.
Thank you all.
All right.
Have a great night.
Good night.
Good night.